Hello, everyone. It's so nice to be in class with you and hang out and chit chat and get to know one another a little bit better. My paper is about this idea of capturing a body of work. And I wanted to share with you my excitement about really beginning to see archivists as artists. And so I will be reviewing the life, very briefly, of Dorothy Porter and describing how her work and creating access to a new body of work really inspired me and really allowed me to begin to see the work that we do to describe and create access to things that maybe people have never seen before is the extraordinary creativity we have as artists. My paper we'll be looking at Dorothy Porter and Africana studies. And here was a woman who was in the right place at the right time. She had the right connections and she had the right skill set to create, describe, and to encourage access. Way back when I was in middle school, they forced us to read this book called The Portraits of an Artist as a Young Man. And it's by an author named James Joyce. If you haven't read it, it's a great novel, and it really talks about the ways in which the society, your family, your religion, your faith, your community can spur you on to things. And James Joyce wrote about his life. And even though it was a novel, he talked about all the things that influenced him. What were the things that helped him to create as an artist? And that book always affected me. I'm not sure why. And when I think about Dorothy Porter, I think about her life as an artist. So I provided a link to the book. It's a PDF file. And that I began to think about Dorothy as an artist and how she developed as a young woman to be an artist, what her life was like, her own autobiography, her own interests, and how did she have the wherewithal to capture a body of work and to be what I'd like to think of as a curator. She had an extraordinary love of books, had a great childhood. Her dad, her mom just really nurtured her, and she took these things that she loved as a child and developed herself as an artist. One of the things that we've learned in this class is description and access, how they're intimately related to one another. That as you describe something, that's going to create more access. And as you evolve as an archivist, using the tools that you have in your disposal, whether they are in the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, or here we are in that 21st, moving on to the 26th century, you're going to use the tools that you have at hand. But what happens when the current system doesn't really describe what you want to describe, what you find passionate about? Well, Dorothy had this experience where she was faced with the Dewey Decimal System, the Library of Congress system, and she loved books. And she wanted to find a way to organize them and label them, and she found that the system didn't work. Who determines these subject headings? She really wanted to have a better understanding of the world that she was looking at and her love of books. And one of the things that she's quite famous for, and we can read that everywhere, and I'll have more references for you, is that, for instance, at the time she began her career and she was learning about being a librarian. She was I think the first Black woman who graduated from library school at Columbia. She was faced with the Dewey Decimal System, and she saw that there were limitations on how things were described, especially the things that she loved, the books that she loved, the communities that she loved. And she noticed that it was fascinating to her with that Dewey Decimal technology that she was happy to learn, that there was rendered African Americans, in her words, as either a slave or an immigrant. That number, there was a one number at that time, 326, that meant slavery, and they had one other number, 325. So when anything came up about Black people, the current practice was to just put them in one of those two categories. And as she says here, as I recall, it meant that colonization link them to an external site. And then in the libraries, many of the white libraries you visit later, every single book, even a book by a poet, and one of her favorite poets was James Weldon Johnson, who everybody she thought knew was a black poet, went under 325 and it linked to an external site. So she was incredibly frustrated, but she didn't quite know what to do. But by the end of her project and working with her professors who were not too happy with her at the time, she decided to redo the Dewey Decimal System and to begin to categorize people in the way that she loved to see them, that she thought would be helpful. So bibliophiles unite. If you love books and you love things that have excited you, begin to think about how would you describe them to somebody? How would you let them know how you felt? And if you're a person who doesn't love to read, take a chance, and I provided some links to some YouTube videos that tell a quicker story about her life and some of the things that she confronted. One of the YouTube videos talks about her link with developing Africana studies and Black studies. And also the second one talks a little bit about the archivists and the librarians who are inspired by the work. So, do you like collecting things? Do you like telling stories? Do you like preserving things? Do you like helping people find the things that they value and more information about new things? Then you're in the right place. You're a creative archivist. This next opportunity, when I walk into a library or an archive, even from when I was a little girl, ring the buzzer, you see the books, I start getting excited. A peek into the archives is wonder and excitement and mystery. What's inside those boxes? Limitations and creativity. When you're limited, you begin to find ways in which you see things differently. There's a picture of her early on in her career where she's got the card catalog and the book list. So I had the occasion last weekend to meet someone who actually knew her. She retired from the Merlin Spingarn collection, which is the archival collection at Howard University. And I asked a guy who was my professor 50 years ago, I said, "Did you know her?" And he laughed and he told me great stories. But I asked him, I said, "What did she do for things?" And I took some notes. He said, "She helped me find things. She was so helpful. She got excited when I got excited. She labeled things so that I could find the Black people." He said, "I was interested in all sorts of things about global, the diaspora, and she inspired me. She helped me to find where they were." And then she inspired other librarians to become scholars, to write, attend meetings, to move internationally. She was often the only Black woman in the room. She was often the only woman in the room, and she worked with other people. She networked. She saw herself as part of a team to find things. And then that's how she helped to create and capture a new body of work. Often when people did their research, in the footnotes, in the beginning, they would say, "Thank you, Miss Porter helped me." What happened to her collection? She had an extraordinary collection. She would walk around with bags, travel all over the world. Her daughter was the curator for her own papers, and at the time of her death, she had quite a collection, and it ended up for auction. Many people wanted it to go to a particular place, but that wasn't the case. She wrote a book, many books, but one that was particularly important when she was beginning to do the archival work is she wanted to write a book about the early writings of Black people, and that was her bibliography, that early writing. I also really loved reading about her and significance of the fact that all of these early writings, and she looked throughout the entire world. I was part of planning my 50th alumni gathering, and we began to think about those milestones, anniversaries, alumni events, celebrations, looking back 50 years and looking at records. And I realized that that was one of the reasons that I have always been excited about history, looking for things, finding out questions. What are some of the things that inspire you? What are those milestones in your life? This is a young woman who's in an archival administration program. She graduated in 2022 from the same college that I went to. And it was so exciting to be able to meet her. We were taking almost verbatim the same course. We were talking about archive space. And here she is. I had requested some records from a gentleman who had graduated from my college, Sterling Brown. He was a poet. He graduated in 1922. And here is this young woman who 100 years later, she has access to his papers, and she got an opportunity to show them to me and process them, and it was so cool. It brought tears to my eyes. And her name is Ruth Kramer, and she went to Simmons. So here we are, looking at the documents, handling them, and just having the best time ever. So once you decide you want to be a creative archivist, guess what? You'll see it everywhere. In the newspaper last week, Dudley Randall is a local guy who started Broadside Press, and the first thing the newspaper article says, tucked away in 12 boxes of the thinnest, most delicate papers full of history and language from a previous time. Words are lifelines that trace back to transitional periods, and they are housed at the University of Michigan Bentley Historical Library. So you are an artist, you are creative. What inspires you? Who do you want to find what you are preserving? What will you leave behind? Thank you for letting me share this with you tonight.